This is the dossier which was published by Promethean Action, and as Scott said, it's entitled A Police Dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. And what we go into here, well, there's two things. First of all, we go into 4 case studies: Abraham Lincoln, William McKinley, John F. Kennedy, and then the current attempts on the life of Donald Trump. And what's demonstrated, what's gone through in the dossier is the hand of the British oligarchy, the British Empire, in the murder of these presidents and in the current attempts on the life of Donald Trump. And, this is shocking to some people, although I would say that, particularly in the case of John F. Kennedy, I mean, overwhelmingly, I think, the American people are aware of the fact that they have never been told the truth about this.
Hello and welcome to Take Control of Your Liberty with Scott Tregurtha, where we help critical thinkers by giving you the most true and accurate information we can find, which they should be giving you on mainstream media, but are not. So you can decide for yourself and take control of your liberty, your freedom, and your future. And now, here is Scott Tregurtha.
Hello, everybody. Now that Trump has signed an executive order to release the JFK assassination files, we need to keep in mind that finding out who pulled the trigger is only the beginning. It's not even enough to find out who ordered that person to pull the trigger. It's not even enough to expose the CIA or FBI for their involvement in it, if that's what comes out. It's not even enough to say the oligarchs or the deep state did it. We need to push to expose exactly which organization or organizations did it. Why? So we can stop them once and for all. And we can. Today's guest, historian, political activist, and author Bob Ingraham is going to share what he knows about who and what organization is responsible for the assassinations of Lincoln, McKinley, and JFK. And the reason this is important to know is that the same entity which committed those murders is also responsible for the attempts on Trump's life and virtually all the wars, assassinations, drugs, racism, sexism, and you name it, now and throughout the ages. And we, the people, need to make sure they are exposed and stopped once and for all. So now, let's watch, listen, and learn. Hi, Bob. Welcome to Take Control of Your Liberty again.
Good to be here.
Good to have you. So, what this is basically about, and let me see if I can articulate this correctly. The reason I wanted to do a follow-up, like a year ago, we did one based on the book you and Barbara Boyd wrote, not the book, but it was a dossier called A Police Dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. And since then, Trump has had 2 attempts that we know of, and he is now president. So, and he is now signed an executive order to release the JFK files, which have been long sought after for 50, 60 years. And the thing about that is that I wanted to kind of drill in on was I realize the public is kind of, a lot of the public wants to know who really pulled that trigger. This has been a question kicking around for a long time. There's arguments over it. There's a million speculations. So once they come out with it, and hopefully they do, they're supposed to, like who actually pulled the trigger, I would like the public to be aware that we don't want to stop there. We want to get to the bottom of what you were bringing out in the police dossier about who really does murder our presidents. And then that leads to who really does it, which is the British, as you put in that writing. And I just want to get into how that occurs, that we want to follow the food chain up to that and that kind of thing. And people are able to write congressmen and urge their delegates to get on this kind of stuff in case they do stop short. So, so to begin with, I guess to open this up, why don't you go into the basics of what that dossier is about, refresh our memories on that, and why we shouldn't just stop at who pulled the trigger?
Right. Okay. Well, I'll just hold this up for people who are watching. This is the dossier which was published by Promethean Action. And as Scott said, it's entitled A Police Dossier. It is the British who murder our presidents. And what we go into here, well, there's two things. First of all, we go into 4 case studies. Abraham Lincoln, William McKinley, John F. Kennedy, and then the current attempts on the life of Donald Trump. And the what's demonstrated, what's gone through in the dossier is the hand of the British oligarchy, the British Empire, in the murder of these presidents and in the current attempts on the life of Donald Trump. And, this is shocking to some people, although I would say that, particularly in the case of John F. Kennedy, I mean, overwhelmingly, I think, the American people are aware of the fact that they have never been told the truth about this. People point to the CIA, the FBI, organized crime, various elements that were clearly involved one way or another in the Kennedy assassination. And they know that there's a deeper truth, a deeper story, which has been hidden from them. And that is the case. There is a deeper truth. And what we go through in the dossier is some of the details of these individual assassinations, but also the historic difference, the historic conflict between the principles of the American Republic and the outlook of the British Empire, because since 1945, there has been the view, people have sort of accepted the view that the British are our closest ally, our British cousins, the special relationship with Great Britain. But that is really not true. And it was never true. And it may come as a shock to a lot of people, but it's historically provable that between 1776 and 1941, the British Empire was rightly viewed as the primary adversary of the United States in the world. Long before Nazi Germany, long before the Soviet Union, throughout the entirety of the 19th century and well into the 20th century, it was widely viewed that our primary adversary in the world, and it's on individual occasions, our primary enemy was the British Empire, and that the British oligarchical system is alien and in opposition to the principles of the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution. And that the British have always viewed, and by I don't mean the British people, but the oligarchical system, the City of London, um, they have always viewed um, the United States of America, the American Republic, when the American Republic was acting on the basis of the principles upon which it was founded, that the American Republic was the number one threat to oligarchical rule, or what people think of as globalization, but that's really a very poor term. That the American Republic is the primary threat, the primary enemy of the oligarchical system, and they have acted to remove American presidents who they deemed as a danger to British imperial rule. And we go through the case of Abraham Lincoln in the dossier. We go through the case of William McKinley, who was a great, great American president. And we go through the case of John F. Kennedy. And here we are today with Trump. And as you said, there have been 2 attempts on his life that we know of. Almost certainly a larger number of threats to his life. And I saw just the other day, and I don't know the details of it, but that one of the things that President Trump has done is he has ordered that both the FBI and the Secret Service turn over to him, to the White House, all of the relevant files in regard to the 2 assassination attempts against him, the one in Pennsylvania in Butler and the one on the golf course, because apparently, and again, I'm not privy to all of the details, but apparently the FBI and the Secret Service both have extensive files on the 2 assassins, the two people who attempted, made an attempt on Trump's life, which have not been made public. Reams of information on these individuals which have not been made public, and Trump has now ordered that this all be made accessible to him, because essentially the same thing has been done with these 2 assassination attempts as was done with John F. Kennedy, which is that files exist in the hands of various government agencies which no one is allowed to see. So this is sort of where we are. I mean, there's a lot more I could say, but that's I think, enough of an answer to your initial question. So why don't you take it from there?
Sure. Now, and you mentioned the CIA and the FBI, and yeah, it's getting believable. People are starting to find it easy to believe that the FBI, well, the CIA, the story is lately the CIA helped arrange the assassination of Kennedy, and the FBI worked on covering it up. And they are suspected right now in what occurred with Trump. Now, there are, but my point here is, and your point in the dossier was, it doesn't really stop there. They might have been tools. All these people, the guy who pulled the trigger is a tool, the CIA is a tool, the FBI is a tool, but who's really behind it? And you just went over that a little bit, the British, and you go over it in depth in the dossier. But one thing you point out that just comes out in that dossier is there are many similarities as to what each one of these victims of the assassinations were doing at the time. They're very similar. Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, but let me start from a different standpoint, which is
Sure.
The situation today. I mean, I think everyone is well aware that one of the themes of Donald Trump and of the MAGA movement, which supports and surrounds Donald Trump, has been this identification, and I guess you could call it an attack on the deep state, what people refer to as the deep state, which involves the intelligence agencies and involves all kinds of things. It involves networks in the Pentagon. Perhaps, I think, as people have become more aware with this controversy around U.S. aid in the State Department, the State Department is actually one of the worst, one of the most corrupt agencies in our government. And what has developed, particularly since Harry Truman, but there's a long history to it. What has developed is that these branches of the executive department, the executive agency, the State Department, the intelligence community, the Pentagon, and many other branches. You see the same thing in various of these branches, but they no longer function as really an accountable part of our constitutional government. They operate on their own and independent of the president himself, and unelected, a permanent bureaucracy which is extraordinarily corrupt. And over the last 50, 60, 70 years, the allegiance of these agencies is not to the president, even though they're part of the executive branch. The allegiance is not to the Constitution, but they have increasingly been integrated into various what you could call imperial or British operations. I think some people might be aware that after World War II, there was a thing set up called the Five Eyes intelligence operation. And this was a sort of a partnership or a integration of intelligence operations. And the reason it's called Five Eyes is that there are five nations that belong to it. And these are the United States, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada. Now, if you look at the Five Eyes, well, four of those nations, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, are all parts of the British Empire, or what you could call, what they call today the British Commonwealth. But the British monarch, King Charles, is the head of state in all five of these nations. His picture appears on the money in all five of these nations. This is simply the modern British Empire. And the United States joined an intelligence partnership with these nations. And today, if you look at the National Security Agency, the NSA, if you look at naval intelligence, ONI, if you look at the CIA, they all operate day in and day out with a partnership, with intelligence sharing, with policy coordination with the other Five Eyes nations. Now, if you go back to these individual cases you're talking about, in the case of Abraham Lincoln, I mean, it was understood at the time that the assassination of Abraham Lincoln was a conspiracy. That was understood. Everyone knew it. And in fact, other people, Mary Surratt and others, were hanged, were executed as part of the conspiracy. But they never went to the top. Now, when Lincoln was assassinated, um, if you look at the original documents that were put out by the U.S. government, various agencies of the U.S. government at that time, what was charged in the documents, not charged, but what was stated in the documents, and these include statements from President Andrew Johnson, statements from Edward Stanton, statements from other officials, was that this was an assassination plot coordinated out of Canada. And at that time, Canada was a British colony, not part of a Commonwealth. It was a British colony. It was charged that the assassination plot was hatched and was carried out of Canada. And during that time, John Wilkes Booth and other members of the assassination plot were regularly going back and forth to Montreal and to other cities in Canada, meeting with British intelligence agents who were deployed out of London. This was known. Everyone, in 1865, after Lincoln was killed, everyone knew this. And originally, what was stated in government documents and in public statements was that this was a broad conspiracy, basically conducted out of Canada, but really originating in London, with British officials, Canadian officials, and members of the Confederate government, of Jefferson Davis's government. Now, what occurred is that when they decided to bring the assassins, the conspirators, to trial, a decision was made that they were going to limit the people they charged with conspiring to murder Lincoln, that they were going to limit this to simply the people who resided in the United States.
Who decided that? Who decided that? Who decided that?
I think it was decided by the military court, by the prosecutors. Really? There were reasons to do this. I'm not saying they were legitimate reasons, but first of all, they had clear evidence that there were a group of people working with John Wilkes Booth, people residing in Baltimore and elsewhere, who were directly involved in the assassination plot. And these were Americans. They lived in America. They could be arrested. They could be brought to trial. And this could be done, fairly straightforwardly. Whereas the broader network of people involved, this involved people living in Canada, people living in London, like Theodore Roosevelt's uncle, Bullock, and others, who were subjects of the British throne, living in outside of the United States. And this would have involved a much more difficult legal path to follow. Now, I'm not saying, they should have done that. They should have gone after that. But this could have resulted in war with the British. So a decision was made to limit the prosecution only to the American citizens who they could lay their hands on and arrest and bring in charge with the crime, with the conspiracy, which they did. But it was widely known that all of the people involved who were ultimately charged with the conspiracy to assassinate Lincoln and John Wilkes Booth himself, who was dead at that point. But it was widely known that that they were merely agents of the Assassination Bureau, which was based in Montreal, in Canada, and everyone knew that. And this is not some wild allegation or theory of history. Um, uh, uh, Booth made numerous trips to Montreal, meeting with British agents, where all of this was discussed, where he was given money, where it was financed, and this was how it was carried out. Now, in the case of McKinley, it's a similar thing. McKinley was assassinated by an anarchist named Leon Czolgosz, and I may be mispronouncing that. It's a very difficult name to pronounce, Czolgosz, who was this sort of deranged anarchist, but he was essentially recruited and deployed by a woman named Emma Goldman, who some people might be familiar with. But Emma Goldman herself was financed and deployed by the Russell family in London. She lived in London for a period of time. She was sponsored by a wing of the British oligarchy. And you have to understand that, what existed in the late 19th century was essentially an assassination bureau. Because if you go back to that period, there were numerous people who were assassinated. I mean, the final straw, of course, leading to World War I, was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, which set off World War I. But prior to that, in the early 1900s, in the 1890s, 1880s, there were heads of state, leading officials, members of royal families, industrialists who were being assassinated all over the place. And this was an assassination bureau that was being run out of London and through British intelligence operations, targeting people for various reasons, people who represented threats to them. And McKinley, as you mentioned, the class I gave on Saturday night, McKinley was directly challenging British imperial rule through his policies of reciprocity, which was a trade policy, through his efforts to create a global bimetallic monetary standard, which was a direct threat to the British gold standard, through which Britain, the City of London, ran world monetary affairs, through his tariff policies, which were creating this phenomenal growth of industry and science and technology in the United States. What was occurring was that American economic growth, technological growth, industrial growth was expanding rapidly, and it posed the threat of spreading worldwide, of putting an end to British imperial rule. So anyway, this is what we see, and you look at Trump today, where Trump is, on the one hand, he's saying America first, but that's true. I mean, but what he is asserting is American sovereignty, that we will not be governed by supranational institutions. We will not accept these rules of globalization, that we are going to rebuild America. We are going to have a rebirth of science and industry and technology in America, and that we are going to negotiate with other nations as sovereign nations. We are not going to accept globalist rule, the rule of the World Economic Forum, or the International Monetary Fund, or the World Trade Organization. But we are going to negotiate between sovereign nations. I mean, Trump said this at his speech at the United Nations when he was president. He said, the future does not belong to the globalists. The future belongs to sovereign nation states. And that is something that he truly believes in. And, by doing what he's doing, he has made himself the target of the oligarchical imperialists, the globalists, the financial powers in London and elsewhere. And this is the battle we're in. I mean, we're in a battle really to continue the mission of the American Revolution, which is to eliminate imperial world rule, and to spread the principles of the American Revolution. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Scott.
It definitely goes a long way. And the antithesis of that is the British is not letting go of their original mission, which they fought us against in the revolution, which is to keep the world under oligarchical rule, their rule, to be specific. So to go up against them, which is what Lincoln, McKinley, and now Trump is doing, is what is triggering them to do all that they do. Assassination attempts, all the attacks in the media, and so on. Now, what was JFK doing specifically? It was in the same ballpark, but what was he doing specifically that was triggered them to actually assassinate him?
Well, various people point to specific things, and maybe it was one or two specific things. But my tendency is to just sort of look overall at at what JFK was doing in the final year or two of his life. And where things were headed. And I think you have to look. I mean, what I've always looked at is the speech he gave in 1963, the year he was assassinated, at American University. And this is sometimes referred to as the peace speech, Kennedy's peace speech. But this was the mature, the wise John F. Kennedy. He was no longer the playboy. He was no longer, just the ambitious politician. But this was the man who had gone through the Cuban Missile Crisis, gone through, the struggles of his administration, of dealing with, both, Khrushchev on the one hand, and these nutcases in the CIA and the Pentagon on the other hand, like, Allen Dulles. You might say, I don't think I'm exaggerating, he had walked through a wall of fire. And you look at this speech he gave at American University, where he says, I don't have any quotes in front of me, but he says, our goal, my goal is peace. Not the peace of the grave, but the peace of a common shared commitment to the future among sovereign nations, a shared vision for our children and grandchildren. And for anyone who has not listened to or read, and the videos of it are up, so you can actually watch it and listen to it. Who has not watched or listened to the American University speech, I urge you to do it. But clearly, he was doing a number of things. I mean, he had fired Alan Dulles. He was committed to clearing out the rot and the filth that had grown up in the intelligence community during the 1950s, late 40s and 50s. He was absolutely committed, and I don't think anyone can argue against this. He was absolutely committed to pulling our troops out of Vietnam. He was not going to go along with the Vietnam War. You have to look at the space program, what he was doing with the space program, and the enormous technological optimism that accompanied the space program. He was committed to massive infrastructure development in the United States. People haven't looked at this, but the amount of dams he was building, the water projects he was building, the electrification projects he was building, it was, unleashing the power of the productive American industry, science and technology. And he was also working with Martin Luther King to try to right the wrongs that had been done through segregation. And there was, this was a period of great optimism, and anyone who lived through that knows that. It was all destroyed later on, but you can't look. People look back on the '60s and they remember, well, the drugs, the anti-war protests, the chaos, the riots in the cities, and all of this. Yeah, but that all occurred after Kennedy was assassinated.
Right.
The riots in the cities, the burning down of Detroit and other cities, Philadelphia, the huge anti-war protests, the drugs, Haight-Ashbury, that was all after Kennedy was assassinated.
Right.
Go back to 1962, 63. And by 63, Kennedy had stopped these attempts to overthrow Castro's government in Cuba. He was getting ready to end our involvement in Vietnam. He was pressing ahead with the space program, and he was saying, we are going to negotiate an end to this nuclear terror with Russia. We are going to find a pathway to peace. And this was all cut short by the assassin's bullet. And there's no question of the fact that, there's just no argument with it. And we'll see what comes out with these documents that are being released. But there's no question of the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was an intelligence, agent. His connections to the CIA are, you can't refute it.
Right.
He was trained as an intelligence operative when he was in the military. He was connected to the CIA and the FBI. When he was arrested, his first phone call was to the FBI. The man who assassinated Oswald, Jack Ruby, was an intelligence operative. Ruby and Oswald knew each other. It wasn't like they were, you have all this stuff. People know this stuff with Guy Bannister and all this stuff. This was an intelligence cesspool they were all operating in. And, but, it's a mistake to say the CIA did it. They may have been involved in it. Various components of the intelligence community. J. Edgar Hoover may have been involved in covering it up, but there was a deeper motivation coming out of London. And again, what you have to recognize is that when you're dealing with the CIA and other branches of military intelligence and civil intelligence in the United States by the early 1960s, you're dealing with the Five Eyes. You're dealing with an integrated intelligence operation between London and Washington and other branches of this around the world, who are functioning entirely separate from constitutional government in the United States, who do not have any allegiance to constitutional government in the United States. And we'll see what comes out with all of, with this order by Trump to release these documents. I mean, I don't know, it's, some people are expecting that, the truth is going to be revealed. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, a lot of things will come out which will open people's eyes. But we'll have to just wait and see on that.
That's right. And that is what got me to initiate this interview, because that's my big fear, is that there's going to be some truth comes out, but, the mechanics of who did it, who actually pulled the trigger, it can't stop there.
No.
This is we need to go to where, we need to trace it up to the source of it, because that source has been the source of virtually all of the war, chaos, drugs, slavery, you name it, from the beginning of almost recorded time. And I think it's about time. I've had enough of it personally, and
Right.
I think
Right.
you too. And I think it's time we blew the lid off. And now we have a guy in office here in the White House, who we have this moment in time where we've got somebody who is willing to do this. It's that he needs to know to keep going. And we need, as the people, to know to keep pushing that, because he's got a lot to do. I mean, once the truth comes out, if everybody's, as to who pulled the trigger, if everybody's satisfied and nobody yells, squawks, it's going to just kind of stop there. And I want the public to become motivated to do just like we're doing right now. Call our senators' offices about, who's Trump's nominations, things like that. We need to be active.
That's
And
right.
that's
Everyone.
what I want. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, everyone. That is the case. I mean, look, we're at a phenomenal moment, and if we don't grasp the moment, each and every one of us, we can no longer be observers. We can no longer be just consumers of the news. Each and every one of us has to act right now. And that's what we're seeing. I mean, look, we've gotten reports that on these nominations for Trump's, cabinet picks, the Tulsi Gabbard nomination, the Robert F. Kennedy Jr. nomination, the Kash Patel nomination, and the other nominations, that the congressional switchboard has been overloaded to the point where people can't get through. And it's not just that Congress, is not taking your calls. Literally, the system can't take any more calls because of the amount of people who are calling in. Tens and tens and tens and tens of thousands of people are calling in every day, literally every day, saying, you got to vote for Tulsi Gabbard. You got to vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., et cetera. And we got to keep this up. We have to keep this up. And I think a lot of Americans recognize the moment we're at. Because, look, for a long time, uh, good-hearted, well-intentioned Americans have become so demoralized and so pessimistic about our country because you have the cover up of the John F. Kennedy assassination, but you have all of these other things. One thing after another. I mean, the condition of our schools, all this stuff, the stuff we talk about today, the transgenderism, but it goes beyond that. It's for years now, years and years and years. It's that there's been a disconnect where for the average citizen, the average American, men and women, there has just been this sinking feeling, in their hearts, in their souls, that the government simply doesn't care about them. That the government is indifferent to their concerns, or even worse, that the government is acting against their concerns. And there's been this sense that there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
That it's almost hopeless. That it's too far gone. That the country is just gonna keep going in the wrong direction towards some horrible end, and that there is simply nothing you can do about it. And people have got accustomed to this over the last 10, 20 years or more. The bailout of Wall Street in 2007, trillions and trillions of dollars to bail out Wall Street, while people are living on, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year and barely able to buy food. Where small businesses are being driven out of business. And and people have just sort of have almost given up hope. And now we're at a moment where, you look at Trump has been in office for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Look at what he's doing.
God, yes.
They're just, it's like, it's not like this, because I'm not equating them to barbarians, but it's like the barbarian invasion of the Roman Empire. They're just marching through Washington, smashing things, slashing and burning, firing people, uprooting these agencies. And it's one thing after another. And all of these executive orders. We're at a moment where, we are in a position to take this government back. Who would have, I think people are almost given up hope that this could be done, but it is being done. And it's truly a remarkable moment we're living at right now. And we'll see, if some of the truths of these things come out or not. Maybe they will. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say.
Oh, that's all very well said. And the point is, the people have awakened quite a bit, or Trump wouldn't have even gotten elected this time.
Right.
And so we made it this far. And now the people are rallying around getting his nominations through. So they're doing good at that. They're doing well at that. They can't stop once he gets all his nominations through, and they can't stop once these JFK files come out, and we all know who pulled the trigger. It can't stop there. We've got to push and push and push till we truly expose the bad guys. And if you don't believe the bad guys are the same ones we're pointing out on this interview, fine. Push to find out who they are. And that's pretty much the main point I wanted to make, and you helped make that really, really well here. Thank you.
All right.
And very well done to everybody who helped get things this far, and let's keep going. Now, over to before we go, I want to make sure everybody knows, and I'll also put it in my my outro, uh, to where they can go to listen and watch your organization's discussions, our organization's discussions, Promethean Action, Saturdays and Mondays. That would be to go to prometheanaction.com, and you'll hear Bob on there as well as many other great speakers. But also, Bob has written many, many books that tell a lot about what's behind what he's talking about right now. There's a lot of history behind these things, and you can go to my website and find out where to get these books. But right now, Bob has a new one,
Yeah.
which I didn't really know about. So, Bob, can you tell us about that?
Sure. Yeah, I've written a number of books, and they're all available on Amazon. Books on Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, a book called The Modern Anglo-Dutch Empire, which if you want to investigate the origins of the British Empire, I would recommend that. But the one I want to mention today is the most recently published one. It's called In Search of America's Revolutionary Culture. And you can see there's some pictures of people on the cover, and I'll just tell you who they are. Royal Tyler, Benjamin Franklin, Francis Hopkinson, Edgar Allan Poe, James Fenimore Cooper, and William Dunlap. Now, obviously, I think everyone has heard of Benjamin Franklin and James Fenimore Cooper and Edgar Allan Poe, but you may not have heard of some of the others. And what this book goes into was it goes into a lot of things, but the primary focus is that at the time of the American Revolution, and then in the decades following the American Revolution, there was, in fact, a great outpouring of profound revolutionary culture in the United States, which involved literary culture, poetry, drama, fiction, but also it involved things like science and technology, and that the American Revolution was not simply a separation from the British Empire. That it was not simply a tax revolt. It wasn't a tax revolt at all in that sense. We said, well, no taxation without representation, and we revolted and we separated from the British Empire to form our own country. That was really a lot like Great Britain, but we were just separate. No. That the American Revolution was founded on principles which we see in the Declaration of Independence, which we see in the preamble to the Constitution, that the American Revolution, the American constitutional republic, was founded on principles absolutely different, alien, hostile to the principles of the British Empire, to the British oligarchy, a different conception of what it means to be a human being, a different conception of man, and a different conception of human society. And that this is what our republic was created to be, for ourselves and for future generations. Excuse me. And that this is what I explore in this book. And I go into, as I said, Benjamin Franklin and many of these other people. So if you like this kind of thing, I'd encourage you to buy it and read it. I think you might find it interesting.
Very good. And correct me if I'm wrong, but besides, if you like this sort of thing, to me, it sounds like it teaches you what it is to be a real American.
It does.
Yeah,
It
where we
it
come
does.
from, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you had these people during the Revolutionary War, people like Francis Hopkinson and others, David Humphreys and John Trumbull and others, who were soldiers in Washington's army, fighting at battles, fighting at the Battle of Yorktown, fighting at, being in Valley Forge, who were also writing poetry and music with revolutionary themes. And it's all lost today. It's written out of the history books. It's really quite, but these were principles they were fighting for. And you can rediscover it today, which we do need. I mean, this is what should be taught in our schools, frankly. Not, oh, America, is founded on slavery and racism, and you should be ashamed to be an American. This horrible, horrible stuff that's been done to our children. The American Revolution was the greatest revolution in human history, and we need to rediscover it, rediscover the principles of it. So, anyway.
Absolutely. And yes, that was written out of our textbooks. Thank you for writing it back in. Not into the textbooks, but into books that we can all read and get now. And I encourage you all to get it. I'm going to get it ASAP. And I want to thank you very much, Bob, for helping us become more knowledgeable as to what's going on and to give us the information we need to know to keep going. So I think we've made our point. I thank you very much. Please stay on for a minute after we say goodbye. I got some things to go over with you, but
Well, it's good to be here.
Thank you, Bob, and everybody. You take care, and I really appreciate it, Bob.
Okay.
Hope you all enjoyed that, as well as learned something and are motivated to make sure we expose and stop these enemies once and for all. Remember, against all odds, Trump survived 2 assassination attempts, and we the people got him elected. And now, due to our pushing our senators, we're getting his nominees through, and now we need to push to get our true enemy, the modern British Empire, exposed and stopped once and for all. And we can. You can find and read Bob's police dossier, as well as all his books, in the resources section of my website at www.takecontrolofyourliberty.com, or go straight to prometheanaction.com for all this and to get information on Promethean Action's Saturday and Monday night discussions. And also, please like, subscribe, and share so you and others can learn more about how to take control of your liberty.